Radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan. The voice of the Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atin sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng pera. Radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugo, todo sa kayod, punong at tulong. Di pagka Blue Eagle, galing hiding at tigil.
The Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour.
Good morning mga Katipuneros, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Yes, good morning. It's Monday. It's May 18, 2020. Yes, modified ECQ. Ano nga bang ibig sabihin nun mga Katipuneros, ano? Mga kaibigan, ano po ba? Yan, pag-usapan natin ang impact po ng ECQ, ng lockdown sa ating ekonomiya. And we have a very ano man tawag dyan, ano? We're fortunate to have him as our guest for today, for this morning. Expert po sa economics. Ayan. Pero bago po yan, good morning to all of you at magdasal muna po tayo. Let's start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord is a fair judge. He rules the world with equity. You, Lord, cannot stand the sight of a proud man. You disapprove of wicked people. You reject all liars and cannot stomach deceitful men. You reward those who are humble, but you humble those who are proud. You raise the humble man to be a leader of your people, but the wicked you humble to the ground. You give the lonely a home to live in. You give shelter to the orphan. But rebels will have to live in a desolate land, sleeping out in the open on cold nights, and having to deal with wild animals. With all my heart, I say to you, Lord, there is no one like you. You protect the weak from the soulless exploiter, the poor from the heartless oppressor. Keep me, Lord, from wanting to do wrong and from joining evil men in their wickedness. Never will I enjoy their riotous feasts. Never will I be part of their plans. Yes, the Lord is a fair judge. He rules the world with equity. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, so ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, my dear friends, welcome again to the Jesuit Hour here at Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. It's a Monday. Marami po tayong matututunan ngayon dito sa The Jesuit Hour. Babalik po kami, sandali lang. We will just have a very short break, and when we return, very briefly, when we return, we will introduce our our guest po, an expert in the economy. Okay, maraming salamat po. Sandali lang.
The Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour.
We will be back in a few, Katipuneros, so please stay tuned.
To open our eyes and ears that we may see the face of Christ and hear his voice in our midst. For 28 years, Jesuit Communications has been promoting the Catholic faith and serving the nation through both traditional and new media. Hear us tackle national issues in light of Christian values on Usapang Kapatid, Pasakalye, and Radio Veritas. Watch our uplifting reflections on Kapet Pandasal and The Word Exposed, as well as our acclaimed TV specials. Listen to the inspiring and soothing music of Jesuit Music Ministry's original artists as you read our spiritually enriching books. To learn more about JustCom's mission of evangelization and education, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and our website, justcom.ph. To give a face to the faceless and a voice to the voiceless, that we may recognize Christ in them and hear his story in theirs.
The Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour.
And we are back. Ayan, let's start our discussion. And we're so lucky, he is very competent, expertly. Nasa linya na po, via Zoom, ang ating pong resource person for today from IBON Foundation. Maybe you're familiar with their very most famous product, IBON Facts and Figures. So my dear friends, please welcome Mr. Sonny Africa. Good morning, Sonny.
Good umaga po. Hello to everyone. Kumusta sa panahon ng lockdown na magdadalawang kalahating buwan na?
Yes, I hope you have good news for us. The joke lang.
Meron naman.
So Sonny, how have you been? How have you coped with the lockdown?
Well, kami personally, both sa pamilya at sa opisina, relatively okay kasi tuloy pa naman yung aming pagtrabaho. Makatrabaho kami to some degree online. Hindi nga kami naka-organize activities. And I think most importantly, may sweldo pa kami the last 2 months. So hindi kami, I think, badly affected by yung lockdown. Of course, ibang usapin yung physical, mental health na nakakulong sa bahay, yung anxieties na hindi makapag-ikot na maayos. But I think kung sa Philippine population, tingin ko nasa upper small percent kami na hindi naman ganun kasama ang epekto ng lockdown.
Yes, of course, we will try to talk about yung the most affected by the lockdown. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but of course today is the first work day under the modified ECQ. We will also talk about that. First of all, I'd like to ask you, I think after the Bayanihan Act was passed, you started monitoring how this was being implemented. And I think after a month, di ba, naglabas kayo ng data and parang exposing how this was implemented. Like sabi nyo, there was a special aid assistance for workers, but only 20% of our workforce received the assistance. Tapos dun sa 18 million na targeted families, I don't know, kakarampot ang nakakuha. Can you tell us about this survey or study that you made, how the Bayanihan Act was implemented, how government assistance was given?
Okay. Of course, in truth, hindi pa clear yung science about should we lock down or not. What's clear is that if the lockdown is implemented, of course, the fact that you're restricting socializing, interaction, economic activity, mako-contain to some degree yung pag-spread ng virus. And of course, in a desperate situation, it makes sense to do that. But ang concern namin is, granted we were driven by the public health emergency to implement a drastic lockdown, there are two sides to the coin. One is a public health coin, which we should be attending to, containing the spread of the virus, preventing deaths. But the other side of the coin is, if you do that, tigilahan na buhay na napakaraming tao. So sa amin, very heartening. It's pleasantly surprising actually that the government said na, okay, we're going to take care of the poorest and low-income 18 million households. I mean, that's actually a bold statement considering we only have about 24, 25 million families. So that's about 75 to 80% of the Filipino families. So the government said, tutulungan nila. So parang at a glance, parang maganda na a public health measure, drastic, may pinsala sa kabuhayan, pero government is going to step in. Ang nakakadungkot lang doon, after that bold statement, ang bagal ng tulong. We have been monitoring on a weekly basis implementation of the social rehabilitation programs, the DOLE programs, even the Department of Agriculture programs para dun sa supposedly 18 million tutulungan. Ang bagal talaga. Ngayon, as of the last report to Congress, which is the most comprehensive report publicly given, as of last week, it seems like 87% of the 18 million households ay nakatanggap. But the thing is, that's 2 months into the program. So the worst thing about actually the implementation of the social programs, it took so long to be implemented. Literally, when we were monitoring implementation, it actually took 3 weeks for the first batch of aid to be given. Tapos, yung nabigyan naman doon were not even 1/5 of all the 18 million. So basically, ang bagal ng pagkuha ng tulong over the last 2 months of the lockdown. And even though sa nakatanggap ng tulong, ang hirap ng effort, you expose yourself in very crowded centers to get your cash subsidy. Tapos, yung nakuha mong cash subsidy, it's so little. So even if the government can say right now, after 2 months of the lockdown, 87% have received cash aid, they're receiving basically about 45,000 pesos lamang. And that is nothing over 2 months na wala kang hanap buhay. So para sa amin, it's been very sad. Very, very good start to say na 18 million will get help. But the way it's been implemented over the past 2 months, it's been very difficult to get that help. It's been very slow in coming. And even if you do get it, you expose yourself to further sickness and ang konti pa rin naman. And it by no means made up for the lack of income over the last 2 months.
Admittedly kasi, di ba, the difficulty was in the distribution, right? They have the money, but how it's gonna be distributed effectively. So they talked about the national ID system, hindi pa pala put in place, and so on and so forth. So it was through the barangays. That was the process. Yeah, so there was confusion. So at the get-go, malabo na kaagad.
Pero alam mo, may strong reservation kami with yung narrative ng government na it's a problem of implementation eh. Actually, kung tutumbukin, yes, there's a problem in implementation. Pero the real problem in implementation is a question of attitude and orientation. Kasi the government from the very start wanted to ration support to the poor. So because they wanted to ration support to the poor, binilabor nila yung requirements to be able to receive the cash subsidies at they lamented the lack of a national ID system. Ngayon para sa amin, that's the wrong attitude. Kasi you told people to stop going to work because of the public health emergency. Because you told so many people to stop going to work, it's incumbent on the government to make up for yung lack of incomes ng mga yan. Ngayon, there are two possible things to do. First, the wrong thing to do is be very stingy about the amount of support you're going to give. And then because you're stingy about the budget for that, you're going to ration it by having bureaucratic hurdles to receive it. That's the wrong attitude. The better attitude would have been, we have to make sure no one falls through the cracks.
Yes.
We have an imperfect database. We have an imperfect distribution machinery. But what's more important? Rationing it to make sure no one gets more than one form of support, or making sure no one falls through the cracks. Sa amin, in a time of extreme crisis, of a lockdown that's dragged on for 2 months, and dapat sabi ng government, we don't want anyone to fall through the cracks. We're going to be generous about the support, meaning we're not going to be strict about the requirements. If there are families getting subsidies from the 4Ps and also from the DOLE initiatives, it's not a problem because una, they're not actually giving much. So if you're going to get 10,000 pesos instead of 5,000, actually, kailangan mo yun kasi you're 2 months na wala kang hanap buhay. So para sa amin, it's such a basic attitude orientational problem. The government, despite its bold statement na we will help 18 million, kumbaga when it's putting your money where your mouth is, they actually did not seem to want to give all 18 million that support. And para sa amin, a good example, even last week nga, they're claiming 87% of the 18 million have gotten what they've received. Actually, if you break that down, that's only about 84 billion pesos. That's not even half of the budget at 205 billion. So parang there are so many people who haven't received what they're supposed to receive. Those who received have gotten so little. Why are you sitting on so much cash?
Correct.
And then they're going to declare, and then inuna pa nila pag-declare, oh, yung mga GCQ areas, hindi na makatanggap ng second tranche. Parang, time out. Something's wrong there. So para alam mo yun, because the attitude is, tipirin natin, we don't want people to get more than once.
Yes.
Everyone's falling through the cracks. So para sa amin, yung orientational point na we should have been generous from the start about the support we're giving to the poor and vulnerable. We should have not made it difficult for them to receive that. Kung from the get-go, yun ang ginawa nilang approach, it wouldn't have happened na for a month and a half, only 1/4 of recipients have been getting received. Meaning, 3/4 of families, meaning, what's 8? Meaning about, 14 million families, we're not getting anything for a month. That's the result of being, so matipid about the support.
You're on point, kasi 205 billion pesos for aid for the poor, but now they're saying that they just finished giving away yung first tranche, which is what you mentioned, 84 billion pesos. So what will happen to the second tranche? Sabi nila, after the first tranche, there will be 10 days for accounting. Diba? The barangays will account for the monies they have given away. So 10 days na walang assistance from that second tranche, So and then as you mentioned, binawi yung sa mga GCQ hindi na bibigyan. So there's a lot of money being saved and not being given away while people are going hungry.
Sa amin, it's so important, that attitude. Yes, we want to scrimp with the limited resources we have, but if our primary objective is to help everyone in need, it means may prior obligation to generate more resources. So I think the government's attitude na magtipid, it's being shown hindi lang how they're treating the lockdown, but actually what they're planning to do in the coming period. Kasi sa totoo lang, even if the lockdown is lifted, there's going to be some return to economic activity, but actually so many will still be unemployed and poor. So para sa amin, it wasn't just about the lockdown. The whole pandemic in the Philippines and the whole world, it's pushed the national economy, the global economy, into its worst crisis in decades. So parang even the thinking let's only help people during the lockdown. Mali yun eh. The thing of the government should be, let's help people during the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. Kung ganon, two things happen. On the premise na 18 million were identified as poor and vulnerable, one thing that should happen is, during the lockdown, the most extreme case na no economic activity, no livelihoods, of course, dapat may support. Pero may second thing to be done. Even after the lockdown, marami pa rin walang trabaho, not just because of the lockdown, but because of the pandemic and because of continued precautionary measures in the global crisis. Because that problem will still be there, dapat pagtuloy pa rin yung support. Kaya sobrang disappointing talaga how the government has not given enough support during the lockdown, but at least with the plans we've seen so far, apparently for the next period, they plan to give businesses more support than the people. Para sa amin, time out, parang let's get our priorities straight.
Pero Sonny, you mentioned that the government seems to be scrimping on the aid assistance. But on the other hand, you have President Duterte saying, may pera ako. What's the reality? What's the real score there? Do we really have money? If we want to help the poor, can we get financial resource for that?
Alam nyo, sama ko lang, no? I don't want to give too much weight to what the president says per se, because he's playing to an audience. He's giving political justification to his actions. So parang on its own, of course, you have to give it weight because it's the president speaking, because it's the president. There's a presumption that's public policy. But I want to not focus on that kasi minsan he doesn't speak from the objective situation, but from what's politically expedient for him. Speaking from the objective situation, the government can always have more money if it wants to. Okay. So I think that's so basic. If we're only going to get stuck with a 4.1 trillion 2020 budget, there is enough money to realign for immediate relief. Diba? You realign items like useless infrastructure projects right now, lalo na mga tourism-related projects. Parang, ba't ka mag-invest in tourism in a time na for about 2 years, that is going to go down? So that's throwing good money after bad. So parang may mga things like that na even within the existing 4.1 trillion budget, the government can realign portions of that to COVID response. Top of mind sa amin, suyurin yung infrastructure projects, see what's no longer viable, see what's more socially prioritized, like hospitals to spend on. There's money there. Secondly, sobrang wrong to not to touch debt servicing. So parang alam mo, Cory Aquino times pa to eh. Nasa high school pa ako, sinasabi, honor your debt. Pero parang, there are certain circumstances, honoring your debt is socially undesirable. And I think this crisis is a good example. Honoring our, right now, over 1 trillion pesos in debt servicing is, I think, socially undesirable. We're not saying naman don't pay everything. Pero siguro naman,
renegotiate.
a portion of the 451 billion interest payments and about 580 billion in principal payments for 2020. Siguro naman at least a portion of that, pwede time out muna.
Right.
Diba? Especially the amounts being paid to development agencies like the World Bank or the ADB or utang sa mga friendly governments like China or the US or Japan. Parang hindi ito yung time mong panggap na we'll keep paying our debt kasi we're a good debtor. So sa amin, even just working within the existing 4.1 trillion budget with presumed revenue appropriations and revenue sources for infrastructure and debt, the government, if it wanted to, can realign portions of that. Pero para sa amin, yun nga it's not just actually just the emergency relief, the lockdown period na kailangan ng support. We're entering a longer term crisis. The government can actually generate even more money beyond the implied revenues for the 4.1 trillion budget. Paano? Sa amin, matagal lang sinasabi, mayaman ang Pilipinas pero naghihirap yung mamayang Pilipino. Kasi there's actually a concentration of huge wealth in a few people, a few families, a few large corporations. So sa amin, it again seems like the socially just and morally justifiable thing to do. If the government needs money for public services, let's tap the private wealth. And there are two major things that can be done to tap this huge accumulation of private wealth. One, the government can issue COVID emergency bonds. The government can every so often issues bonds, parang essentially it's debt. It sells debt. If the government said, okay, hey rich folks, hey big corporations, you're sitting on a ton of cash, can you sort of buy into my 500 billion pesos in COVID solidarity bonds? Because it's an emergency, it's going to be at very low interest rates or no interest rates or even negative interest rates, parang tulong sa bayan.
Yeah,
The government can issue bonds like that, but it's not doing that. Kasi, yun nga, like with the debt servicing, ayaw niya ma-affect ang kanyang valuable credit ratings. But if it wanted to, it could do that.
Yeah.
Secondly, yung bonds that's still borrowing, sa amin, the crisis and the need for public intervention on a large scale, it brings to mind right now where the biggest source of sustainable income is. The income and wealth of the rich. So para sa amin, it's so weird na the government says na walang pera, but there's a small portion of our society na sobrang daming pera. Why not exert your sovereignty as a nation, exert your authority as the government with the obligation to raise resources? Why not use that to charge higher personal income tax on the richest Filipinos instead of lowering it like ginawa during sa train? Why don't you implement a wealth tax? I mean, if the 50 richest Filipinos right now are sitting on 4.1 trillion in wealth, ano ba to tax wealth over 1 billion pesos 1%, or wealth over 2 billion 2%, or wealth over 3 billion 3%? I mean, that's 50 Filipinos, with 4.1 trillion in wealth. If you tax just 1, 2, or 3% of their wealth, not everything pa nga, just portions above 1 billion pesos, they can generate 237 billion pesos.
Wow.
So para sa amin, it's a dead end to say walang perang gobyerno. Because politically, kung gusto ng gobyerno mag-raise ng pondo for its needs, to fulfill its responsibilities, its human rights responsibilities, it actually can. Kaso, political economy thing siya. Takot siya to antagonize big business.
Yes.
Despite all the bluster, takot siya to antagonize our oligarchs and wealthy families. Para sa amin, anong klaseng gobyerno pa ba tayo? I mean, if you want a democratic government, it means apportioning society's wealth to social needs. And right now, this is the golden opportunity of the government to do that.
Well, it still has time. Abutin pa raw ng 2 taon, 2 years itong crisis na ito. Okay, going back to the Bayanihan Act, the budget for that. You also reported, IBON Facts and Figures reported about the assistance given to the workers. How's your monitoring on that?
Well, siguro first to clarify, given the structure of the Philippine economy, we don't just have formal employed workers. We actually have a huge amount, halos the same amount in the informal sector. So when IBON says that we have to help the workers, we're referring both to those informal establishments, but also those na essentially informal sector earners, mga micro small entrepreneurs, mga nagbebenta sa bangketa, mga vendors, mga may karinderya, etc. Actually, very disappointing then. In the very, very latest report of the DOLE last week that President Duterte to Congress, only about 680,000 workers have been given support in terms of yung wage subsidies nila. And they were only getting about 5,000 pesos over the last 2 months. Okay. So again, out of 18 million Filipino families promised help, out of that portion, maybe about 10 to 12 million are workers. Only 680,000 have gotten DOLE support. That's
a huge gap.
Yeah, it's a super huge gap. Actually, of course, mas maraming nakatanggap din sa 4Ps na programs and the non-4Ps from the DSWD. Fortunately, I think a lot of those naman are going to be also workers. Kasi under the guidance ng DSWD, if you received under the PSWD Social Innovation Program, you're disqualified from the work.
Yeah.
Okay naman yun. Sige, I mean, if you're going to have guidance, that seems to make sense. But yun nga, sa amin, if you step back, the bigger problem is too many people are falling through the cracks pa rin. So kung expansive sana yung DSWD, kung hindi maigpit doon, para sa amin about 10 to 12 million formal workers ay mahagip doon. Sige lang, give it through DSWD or give it through DOLE, doesn't matter, basta makatanggap sila. But sana makatanggap sila more than the 5,000 pesos.
Okay, what about this? After 3 weeks or even a month into this pandemic, Congress enacted law helping the SMEs naman, providing 50 billion pesos. How did that go?
Well, right now, I at least again, we have to rely on the formal reports to government. They've promised loans and loan guarantees, but we haven't heard of that being implemented yet.
Yes.
Kasi again, marami requirements. Although, sa totoo lang, of course, I think iba yung treatment dapat dun sa emergency support. I think emergency support for families should be given immediately because they need it.
Yeah.
Sa amin, it's so straightforward. Huwag na mag-tumbling sa mga criteria requirements to receive that. But I think for businesses, enterprises, I think this is actually a good time to impose some kind of criteria. At para sa amin, ang important criteria, pwede gawin 2 stages. One, emergency support for their workers, lalo na kung hindi nakatanggap ng mga social amelioration. So I think at that level, you can be very generous, give every enterprise needing support. Pero sa amin important yung second stage, kumbaga in the next 6 months and the next maybe year, let's give support to businesses na kailangan for long-term development. So halimbawa, don't give support to large businesses because chances are they have enough cash anyway to tide them through the crisis.
Yes.
Sa amin, don't do that. Secondly, give priority to businesses that strengthen domestic agriculture, food processing, food manufacturing, and other manufacturing process natin, like maybe manufacturing personal protective equipment or components of ventilators, which we'll need more of, or other medical equipment. So para sa amin, for the longest time, for about four decades now, the government has been saying, they let the market decide what kind of economic activity there will be because the free market knows all, government stupid. And actually, right now, I think people are realizing the free market won't deal with the crisis. People should also realize the free market won't give development.
Yeah.
Because before the crisis, underdeveloped pa rin tayo. We had huge unemployment despite official reports na maliit. We had collapsed agriculture, collapsed Filipino manufacturing even before the pandemic. Para sa amin, this is the moment, if we're going to give the support to enterprises, let's give support to domestic agriculture towards food self-sufficiency and creating jobs in domestic farming. Secondly, if we're going to give support to manufacturers, let's not give support to manufacturers oriented towards foreign markets. Let's give support to Filipino manufacturers oriented to using Filipino inputs and selling to the Filipino market para jobs created stay at home. Kasi if halimbawa we support an importer, we're actually supporting jobs abroad from where we're importing from. So sa amin, ganong klaseng criteria, it's a good time to give support pa rin, give large support, but give support to enterprises that will contribute to long-term Filipino development, meaning agriculture and developing a domestic manufacturing base.
Okay, let's now talk about the impact of all of this, yung pandemic on our economy. I heard one government official say that we're not yet into recession. Whereas may nagsasabi in the global scale, global economies have entered into this global recession na raw, no? So what's the real score? How is the Philippine economy after 2 months of this pandemic? How are we doing?
Okay. Well, I think technically, the government official you're referring to can be technically correct. Kasi technically, to be officially counted in recession, you have to have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth.
Okay.
So, because we only have the first quarter data, technically, pwede sabihin, there's no data saying we're in recession. Having said that, that's kind of pushing it.
Ang sabi niya,
it's a stretched argument kasi the first quarter data came out. In the first quarter data, the economy contracted by 0.2%. So negative na siya. Also remembering that negative 2%, negative 0.2% growth in the first quarter was only from 2 weeks of lockdown. Kasi first quarter is only January, February, March. Capture lang niya yung suspension in activity from the lockdown of the last 2 weeks of March. Pero the second quarter data will cover the whole of April and the whole of May.
Yes.
And also continued precautionary suppression measures even after the lockdown is lifted. So, yeah, you can technically say wala pa tayo sa recession, but you know, if you're kind of being honest, guaranteed the second quarter data is going to be much worse. Hindi na kailangan hintayin yung official data to say that. And I think important yung na-raise na point na yan kasi right now, yun na actually most, I think, problematic in terms of the government's attitude. We can forgive economic managers for trying to be all sunshine and happiness. But minsan kung nasa crisis, mas okay to accept the problem para you can identify the solutions.
Correct.
So parang, I think yung pattern of saying, yeah, things aren't so bad, kaya natin, that's putting a brave face na blind na to how bad things really are. I think that's actually a question of attitude then. That's also preventing us from changing the bad economic policies of the past and preventing us from taking bolder measures to solve the problem right now. And where are we right now? Well, a couple of days ago lang, very recently, we heard the latest government estimates for 2020. Dati sabi ng NEDA, backup maging, negative 0.6% to maybe, I think, 4.3% positive growth pa for 2020. Wow. Sabi na no March yun.
Wow.
that was in March. Ngayon, I think, tutunawan na sila. 2 days ago, the government's estimate is negative 2% to as much as negative 3.4% for 2020. Wow. So, medyo natunawan na naman sila. So I think, where's the economy right now? Sa totoo lang, we have to be very clear. The economy was slowing even before the pandemic. Sobrang important mag-grasp yun Kasi if the government is so short-sighted to blame everything on the pandemic without acknowledging and accepting, the economy has been slowing for 3 straight years since 2017. It was in 2016, 6.9% yung growth natin. In 2017, from 6.9, naging 6.7. The following year, naging 6.2. Last year, naging 5.9. Even without the pandemic, the economy would have been even slower in 2020 for the 4th year in a row. So sa amin, why is it important to stress that point? It's not to be negative. It's to accept, even before the pandemic, may problems tayo.
Yes.
So if your attitude is only to fix pandemic problems, you're going to miss out. Hindi You have to fix the problems even before, which is over-reliance on remittances, over-reliance on BPOs, over-reliance on services instead of domestic manufacturing, liberalization of agriculture, which is decimating agricultural jobs. Parang, if you're going to blame the pandemic lang and not realize may slow down because of these other factors, short-sighted yung problem, short-sighted yung solutions mo. And I think transition nga from the poor relief being given during the lockdown, sa amin, may poor attitude din towards developing the fundamentals of the economy. Because the government is blaming the pandemic lang. It's not just the pandemic. There were problems before. To get out of the crisis now, aggravated by the pandemic, we have to resolve the problems pre-existing sa pandemic and also solve the problems because of the pandemic.
Yes.
At actually sa amin, may opportunities na create yung pandemic. So we can actually build on the opportunities caused by the pandemic to fix yung mga problems natin.
Wow, that's a very good point. Hindi yan nababanggit. Ikaw lang ang naringgan ko niyan, ano? That even before the pandemic, the economy was already on decline. Ano? Wow. Because if you hear it from government economists, diba, sabi nila we're doing well, especially if the build, diba, strategy of government is implemented, is carried out, then that will give jobs, etc., etc. So there's a lot of economic activity. So,
ako, alam mo, super nagtataka talaga ako eh. Unfortunately, our economic managers have turned into propagandists instead of technocrats. Sa amin, it's a matter of public record. The Philippine Statistics Authority data will show slower and slower growth over the last 3 years. It will show a trajectory of even slower growth for 2020. Pero yun nga eh, the government always insists, kung maglalabas ang growth figures, they're going to give brief mention of the slowdown, pero tatabunan yun with, but the Philippines is one of the fastest in Asia. Pero sa amin, that's not the point. Sabihin nila, despite what's happening, we have investment grade credit ratings. Masabi namin, but in the grand scheme of things, the problem is the economy is slowing talaga.
Okay, but with this pandemic, anong industriya, anong sector of the economy is hard hit?
Well, syempre, immediately hard hit, basically everything. Kung hindi ka counted as an essential industry, you're hard hit. That's across the board. At even among the essential industries, affected pa rin ang operations mo because lack of public transportation, collapsed markets. So it's actually an across the board affects economy. I think the worst hit talaga by the lockdown and the precautionary measures we will continue to take after the lockdown, ang worst hit will be trade talaga.
Trade.
Wholesale and retail trade because one, people are scared to go out and spend generally kahit na nagka-traffic kahapon, pero generally pigil pa rin sila. Secondly, pinagbabawal pa, di ba? Maraming stores from opening, so trade talaga will be affected. Tapos may second order effect pa kasi kung bumagsak ang trabaho ng mga tao, rising unemployment, low incomes, that's another second order effect to even further depress trade. Transport also affected syempre because because of the lockdown, public transport across the board ay pinagbawal doon, including yung airlines. So trade and transport I think are the most immediately affected. Also leisure and tourism, meaning yung mga lahat ng mga leisure activities natin, arts, entertainment, pero also maraming hotels and restaurants. So I think a lot of mga leisure tourism related activities ay affected. And I think understated but maganda ma-highlight, education sector natin. We have a very private sector-oriented education system. Itong extension ng bakasyon, late opening of schools, I think will hit a lot of private schools very hard. So yun ang main affected. May second layer, syempre, manufacturing in general will be affected because of the general slowdown and decline. To some degree, even banking and insurance will be affected by the lower level of economic activity. I think real estate also will take a hit in the coming period, which is very dangerous because we've been riding on a real estate construction boom the last 15 years. So as any slowdown in real estate from less overseas remittances, less BPOs, people having less money to invest or less confidence to invest in condominiums or whatever will depress, I think, the real estate market then.
Would there be any sector that would have gained from the pandemic? Like, halimbawa, sabi nila, food and agriculture daw because they're part of the essentials, di ba? In the lockdown, we need food. So food and agriculture should have gained, or what do you say?
Okay. Ako, I think ipaghiwalay natin, from the pandemic, may dalawang potential gainers. One gainer is yung additional demand for your products. So actually, to some degree, yung pharmaceutical industry, I think, and medical equipment industry, kita talaga from the pandemic because governments and hospitals are spending more to respond. So I think, sa totoo lang, the biggest gainer will be the producers of masks, ventilators, the whole range of medical equipment and supplies, I think yan ang biggest gainer from the pandemic because it's a health crisis. Pwede sabihin niya yung mga nag-deliver ng food, etc. But actually mitigating lang yan because they're delivering to mitigate the fact that people can go to restaurants anymore, they can go to stores anymore. So I don't think it's fair to say na net gainer yung transport industry. I think net loss pa rin sila. Pero apart from the direct gainers, like yung medical-related na mga spend na manufacturers, suppliers, and services, hospitals actually will give, private hospitals I think will make money. Ironically, in a time of health crisis. That's one direct gainer. Pero I think may notion na hindi gainer, pero insulated. Food, I think, is insulated because people will still keep buying.
Yes.
Para sa amin, that creates an opportunity. Opportunity siya bakit? Kasi the pandemic has shown that it's dangerous to rely on foreign sources of food. Vietnam declared an export ban in March. It had to take bilateral negotiations of the Philippine government with Vietnam, pleading, don't ban exports to us kasi about a third or 2/3 of our rice comes from you. Pumayag ang Vietnam. But ganun pa man, it highlights delikado to rely on foreign sources of food. So para sa amin, the pandemic should create an opportunity for domestic agriculture because demand for food is inelastic. People will have to buy. I think it's shown the folly of relying on foreign food exports. So dapat opportunity to strengthen domestic agriculture, to produce more food for the domestic market, which actually have a good bonus. By producing more food for the domestic market, you're also producing more jobs in agriculture, and also producing more incomes among farmers, fisherfolk, food manufacturers to spend locally. So para sa amin, sobrang good opportunity to highlight yung matagal na sinasabi ng progressive groups. Liberalization will not solve our food security issues. Liberalization will not create domestic jobs. Here's a good point. Let's protect and support domestic agriculture to produce food and to produce jobs in the local economy. Sa food yon. Another potential gainer, but it depends if the government decides, the government can support domestic manufacturing. Marami sa mga personal protective equipment, not so high-tech naman kind of basic. If we'll need precautionary measures for the next 2 years, that's a market for personal protective equipment, masks, gowns, alcohol. We should support that and also even support, if not manufacturing ventilators, kahit medical supplies lamang or components of ventilators, because we'll have a guaranteed domestic market for the next year, 2 years habang may new normal tayo. And that's an opportunity to create the foundations of an industrial base na after 2 years, move on to higher value-added manufacturing. And I think that's kind of tricky because the government will have to accept just because you have a high-tech manufacturer in an export processing zone, that's not Filipino. Even if Intel comes back or Texas Instruments is here or all these mga electronics manufacturers in the Philippines, if they're foreign firms, the benefit is not to the domestic economy. The benefit is to the foreign economy and the foreign manufacturer. Para sa amin, golden opportunity, let's start small where we are because of 4 decades of liberalization, which destroyed domestic manufacturing. We start where we are, take our baby steps to develop the domestic manufacturing sector.
Okay. Ang problema, of course, will the government do it? Focus on manufacturing here locally. That's a big question mark. Anyway, what about this question? We're talking about the Philippine economy, but all around us, people are saying the global economy has gone into recession. How will that impact on us as well? On our prospects for recovery?
Again, everything naman has a positive and negative aspect, no? I think the negative aspect of the global recession, I think even the IMF has said possibly the worst since the Great Depression almost a century ago. I think the main negative is 4 pillars of our sound fundamentals are going to be decimated. Overseas work and remittances. That's going to go down. That's going to weaken at the very least, possibly go down. I think some Atenean economists have predicted maybe about 300 to 400,000 displaced OFWs.
Wow.
So malaki yun. I think they've estimated about maybe 15 to 25% fall in remittances. So one big negative of the global recession, one major pillar of the economy, driving consumption, driving real estate, that's going to be decimated. Second major pillar, export manufacturing. A lot of actually our so-called Filipino manufacturing is actually foreign manufacturers with their global value chains portions in the Philippines. Because of the general slowdown in the global economy, depressed consumption for manufactured goods, but also an attempt, I think, by manufacturers to relocate, to rationalize their global value chains, that's going to take a hit as well. So that reliance on foreign manufacturing investment to drive our exports and the economy, that's going to be decimated as well. Third, we're actually very reliant also on services. BPO services in particular, to some degree, POGOs na rin. The level of consumption going down will also affect BPOs. Hindi naman remote work yan, but they're reliant on projects and the consumption economy in the US, especially in Europe. That's going to take a hit as well. Last, I think generating foreign investment. We never should have relied on foreign investment to drive the economy, but in truth, the last few years have been more and more dependent on foreign investment. That's going to take a hit as well. Para sa amin, that's four things: overseas remittances, export manufacturing, foreign direct investment, and BPO service exports. Tourism then is a service export. That's all going to be hit hard by the global recession. Para sa amin, kung yun ang negative, dapat may positive. And the positive is the government, for the first time in 4 decades, is realizing it has to intervene. Kasi for 4 decades, sabi, globalization, government's corrupt, government's incompetent, get out of the economy. Because the government is being obliged to intervene in the economy now, the positive or potentially positive, let's intervene to strengthen the domestic economy. Let's intervene to strengthen domestic agriculture. Let's intervene to strengthen Filipino manufacturing. Actually, let's intervene to strengthen the public transport system. Let's intervene to improve our utilities na hindi na privatized and profit-driven. So parang that's an opportunity created. But again, like all opportunities, it's up to the government to seize it or not. I think tama yung nabanggit niyo earlier. Will the government do it? Well, if the government's still captive to yung sobrang obsolete na neoliberal free market policies amid the global recession, amid increasing protectionism worldwide, if they're going to stick to their free market textbooks, neoclassical textbooks, that opportunity is going to slip us by.
Puro kasi mga Atenista ang kinukuha ang economist ng gobyerno eh. Dapat kunin ka.
Okay ako. Sa akin, mas okay kung mas maraming Atenista in economists in government. It's the other school down the road na pinagkukunan nila. No, honestly, sa totoo lang, the more dogmatic neoliberal free marketeers come from the school down the road.
Talaga?
Totoo lang. Economists from the Ateneo, yung mga nakakausap kami, they're actually much more open, I think, to government intervention. Of course, iba rin yung position ng maraming civil society groups, activist groups, but I think on a continuum, it's that your neighbors down the road na I think most problematic. Ateneo is actually very, very favorably positioned for public policy right now. It's not the most progressive compared to like mga activist groups, but I think so totoo lang,
they're open.
Sana mas pakinggan yung Ateneo economists more than the other economists.
Okay, we have a few minutes na lamang, pero can you paint for us a hopeful scenario for the economy? Is there one?
Well, there can be a hopeful scenario. Parang the government can do so much. I think, again, globalization has demonized governments as corrupt, inefficient, inept, both politically and also in the economy. Sa amin, it's time to correct that because our only optimism for a better economy, for a better life for Filipinos, for better livelihoods for Filipino families comes from the government intervening in their favor. Any attempt to organize the economy on free market terms will benefit a few lang palagi, will benefit those who have capital, those who have power, the oligarchs. So I think our bright spot is we can have a more democratic economy if we have more democratic politics. And if the democratic politics of the government was used to shape the economy in favor of the people, developing domestic agriculture, developing domestic industry, guaranteeing the rights of workers while you develop industry, guaranteeing the rights of farmers and fisherfolk while you develop agriculture, supporting the social services, especially the public health system. Actually, that's a very, very bright future for us. But it needs correcting, I think, very wrong thinking na the market will solve things. Sa amin, I expect in the coming months, the government will keep saying na will take measures to bridge until a vaccine is developed. Alam mo, dapat mag-alarm bells sa atin dyan because that thinking presumes that the old normal was good. It's just transition in the new normal to when the vaccine is developed, bumalik tayo sa old normal. Sa amin, dapat mag-alarm bells na. Whenever we hear terms like the government, this COVID response is bridging until magkaka-vaccine, whenever we hear things like we need a stimulus lang to help us while we're weak para makabalik dun sa dati. Alarm bells na yon because we don't want to go back to yung dati na yon. A brighter future comes from realizing that the old normal was really bad. The bright future will come from we can build a better normal, but the government has to intervene. It has to intervene democratically. It has to intervene with transparency, with accountability, with civil society, the academe, holding it to account for things it's not doing properly. I think that can happen. But it all depends on the government changing the way it's behaving. And I think as citizens, it's incumbent on us to say na, time out, we want the government to act better. We're not going to accept returning to the old bad normal. We're not going to accept your propaganda, the untruths you're saying about how good things are. We know there's a problem. We know something can be done kung gagawin nyo.
Yes.
Sa amin, yan ang brightest source of hope natin.
Okay, well said. May mga bumabati lang sa'yo, no? So, Iam Quejas is watching from Dubai.
Okay.
Kilala mo ba to? So, thank you, Raw, for a very good speaker today. Wow, syempre. Si Pen Bayato is watching from Saudi. Aris Lacuna, Tessie Buen, Les Menjola, Jess Barcelona, Tessa Cienza. Somebody is watching us from Peru, all the way from Peru, si Milan Gonzalez Feliz. And si Valerie Ma Angus, I from Malaysia. Hopefully, it will be in English. Yes, opo. Hopefully, we manage. Si Obet, Jane, Shirl, and so many more. So it's watching also. So thank you siguro what can an ordinary Filipino do in the face of this pandemic and the economic woes of the country?
Well, alam mo, we're not ordinary. We're Filipinos.
Okay, sorry.
As Filipinos, we have a right to development. We have a right to demand government to stop protecting the rich and foreigners, but to prioritize the needs of Filipinos and Filipino producers. So para sa amin, it all starts from not accepting what the government says at face value without having a critical view.
Yes.
Upon having a critical view, it's so important we should make our voices heard in whatever platform we have. Social media is always a start, but that's limited because may glut of stuff on social media. Even the wrong-minded people are on social media, and actually they use social media for their own benefit. So I think it's a start to express our views on social media. convinced more, to be more critical about the situation. Pero para sa amin, there's really no substitute for boots on the ground. We have to make our presence felt in policy circles, in the academe when they are consulted, but also on the streets. It's harder now, of course, no mass gatherings, but sa totoo lang, the reason the government's so allergic to mass gatherings is because they know if people are on the streets, they're making known what they think, and they think things can be better. So sa amin, all Filipinos should be more critical, use every venue, whether social media or policy circles, and especially the streets. Let's make known what our positions are, and let's demand our right to develop. Because we have a right to development, that is not a government, should not be a government of the few. It should be the government talaga for the majority of people.
Amen. Thank you so much, Sonny. Once again, thank you.
Okay po, just get in touch po if I can help any time in the future. Thank you.
Salamat. And that has been Mr. Sonny Africa from the IBON Foundation. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Until tomorrow, therefore, dito po sa the Jesuit Hour, same time po. Tomorrow, we will have stories from frontliners. Actually, we have one to be interviewed tomorrow. So watch out for that. Once again, 11 a.m. here at the Jesuit Hour. So maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat, especially those who tuned in from overseas. Thank you so much. And to Mr. Sonny Africa, thank you once again. Hanggang bukas po. Have a nice lunch. And see you tomorrow here at the Jesuit Hour. Bye-bye.
Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour.